Hi there, welcome to Fantasy Hub. I'm Mia, your storyteller. Today's story is filled with heartache, discovery, and a twist you won't see coming. So let's begin.
I should have known my life was about to implode the moment I walked into that academic symposium in Chicago. Picture this, 300 literature professors crammed into a hotel ballroom that smelled like industrial carpet and broken dreams. All of us pretending our dissertations on post-colonial feminine narratives in 19th century literature were actually going to change the world. I was there presenting my research on Sylvia Plath's coffee shop references. Yes, that's a real thing, and yes, I spent 2 years of my life on it. The presentation went well enough, but by midnight, I was stranded. My hotel reservation had mysteriously vanished, probably sacrificed to the booking gods, along with my dignity and my savings account. That's when I met Kali. I was standing in the hotel lobby, phone pressed to my ear, arguing with a customer service representative who clearly had better things to do than help a panicked literature professor find a place to sleep. Ma'am, I understand your frustration, but we're completely booked through the weekend. Rough night? I turned around and nearly dropped my phone. Standing behind me was this woman about my age, early 30s maybe, with short, messy blonde hair that looked like she'd been running her hands through it all day. She wore a vintage band t-shirt under a leather jacket that had seen better decades. And her smile was the kind that suggested she knew secrets you desperately wanted to learn. Hotel lost my reservation, I said, hanging up in defeat. Apparently, I'm sleeping in my rental car tonight. That's tragic and dangerous and completely unnecessary. She extended her hand. I'm Kali. I run the coffee shop across the street growing coffee. And before you ask, yes, I named it that on purpose, and no, I'm not sorry about the innuendo. I laughed despite my exhaustion. Maria, I teach literature at Northwestern, and right now I'm a homeless literature professor. Well, homeless literature professor Maria, I have a couch that folds out into a bed. It's not the Ritz, but it's better than a parking lot, and I make excellent coffee. She hooked her pinky around mine in this casual, intimate gesture that sent electricity straight up my arm. What do you say? I should have said no. I should have called another hotel, or driven home, or slept in my car like a responsible adult. Instead, I said yes, because something about Kali made me want to throw caution to the wind and see what happened next. Her apartment was exactly what you'd expect from a hipster coffee shop owner, exposed brick walls covered in vintage concert posters. Fairy lights strung everywhere like Christmas had exploded, and approximately 17 plants in various states of either thriving or dying. The promised fold-out couch sat in the living room, surrounded by empty wine bottles and coffee mugs, in various stages of abandonment. Wine, she offered, already opening a bottle of something red and probably expensive. I should probably sleep, I said, but I accepted the glass anyway. 3 glasses later, we were sitting on her non-folding couch, and I was telling her about my Plath research while she told me about the neighborhood characters who frequented her coffee shop. There was Mrs. Chun, who ordered the same macchiato every morning and left exactly 75 cents as a tip. There was Marcus, the street musician who paid in guitar serenades and occasional $20 bills. And there was Tony, the guy who ran the corner deli and had been trying to ask Kali out for 2 years. And you're not interested? I asked, surprised by how much I cared about the answer. Callie's smile was mysterious. Tony's sweet, but he's not really my type. What is your type? She looked at me over her wine glass, and I felt something shift in the air between us. Smart women who get passionate about dead poets and blush when they're nervous. I was definitely blushing. I don't blush. You're blushing right now. She was right, and we both knew it. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife, but I was too nervous to do anything about it. Instead, I yawned dramatically. I should let you sleep, Holly said, standing up. Let me grab you some blankets. She disappeared into her bedroom and returned with what appeared to be every blanket she owned, plus a pillow that smelled like her shampoo, something vanilla and warm. I settled onto the couch, which was about as comfortable as sleeping on a stack of books, while she headed toward her bedroom. Holly, I called out as she reached her doorway. Yeah? Thank you for this, for letting me stay. She smiled, and for a moment I thought she might say something else. Instead, she just said, "Sweet dreams, literature professor." I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling and trying not to think about the way her fingers had felt wrapped around mine, or the way she looked at me when she said I wasn't Tony's type. When I finally fell asleep, I dreamed about coffee shops and poetry and the sound of Kelly's laugh. I woke up at 3 in the morning, tangled in something that definitely wasn't the couch. The blankets were twisted around my legs, and there was warm breath against my neck that sure as hell wasn't coming from a pillow. I was in Callie's bed, pressed against her back, with no memory of how I'd gotten there. "This isn't the couch," I whispered, more to myself than to her. Callie stirred, turning in my arms until we were face to face in the dark. Her voice was rough with sleep when she answered, observant and sexy. "No wonder you teach literature." And then she kissed me. It wasn't gentle or tentative or any of those things first kisses are supposed to be. It was hungry and desperate, like she'd been thinking about it as long as I had. Her hands tangled in my hair, and I could taste the wine on her lips, could feel the rapid beat of her heart against my chest. "Maria," she breathed against my mouth, and the way she said my name made something inside me catch fire. I pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. "How did I end up in your bed?" "You were talking in your sleep," she said, her thumb tracing the line of my jaw. "Something about Plath and coffee shops and wanting to kiss the barista. I figured I should wake you up before you said something embarrassing, and instead you brought me to your bed. Well, I couldn't let you suffer through literary wet dreams alone." I laughed, which broke whatever tension had been building between us, and suddenly we were kissing again, and her leg was sliding between mine. And somewhere in the distance, I heard the thump of a book hitting the floor. Later, I would discover it was my first edition copy of the Bell Jar, which felt like either the most appropriate or most blasphemous thing that could have happened. But in that moment, all I could think about was the way Callie's hands felt on my skin, and the soft sounds she made when I kissed the hollow of her throat, and how I never wanted this night to end. I should have known our story wouldn't be simple when I woke up the next morning to the sound of Callie shouting obscenities in what I was pretty sure was Italian. I stumbled out of her bed. I reminded myself with a flutter of satisfaction and found her in the kitchen, gesturing wildly at her phone while a pot of coffee burned on the stove. "What's wrong?" I asked, turning off the burner before her apartment could burn down. "I did something stupid," she said, running her hands through her already messy hair. "Really, really stupid? Define stupid." She held up her phone, and I could see a video on the screen. The quality was shaky and dark, but I could make out what looked like an alley behind her coffee shop. There were voices, muffled and angry, and then the unmistakable sound of a gunshot. "Jesus, Callie. What is this?" "I was taking out the trash last night after I left you at the symposium," she said, her words coming out in a rush. I heard voices behind the shop, and I thought maybe it was kids or something, so I looked. But it wasn't kids, Maria. It was two guys making some kind of deal, and when I tried to back away, my phone started recording. And you filmed a drug deal. I filmed a murder." Her voice was barely a whisper. "The guy pulled a gun and shot the other one right there, in the alley. And I got it all on video." My stomach dropped. "Please tell me you went to the police." I was going to, but then I saw the shooter's face clearly when he turned toward the light. He looked right at my phone, Maria, right at me. He knows I saw. This was bad. This was very, very bad. Okay, we need to think about this rationally. You have evidence of a murder. I need to run, she interrupted. Pack up and get out of town before they find me. Collie, you can't just run away from this. Watch me. She was already moving toward her bedroom, pulling out a duffel bag and throwing clothes into it with reckless abandon. I followed her, my mind racing. This is insane. You have to go to the police. They can protect you. With what? A restraining order? She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Maria, you didn't see this guy's face. He wasn't some small-time dealer. This was professional. A kind of professional that doesn't leave witnesses. A chill ran down my spine. So what are you going to do? Disappear for a while. I have some money saved up, and a friend in Portland who... She was cut off by the sound of glass breaking downstairs. We both froze, staring at each other in the sudden silence. The coffee shop, Collie whispered. More. Glass breaking, and then the sound of heavy footsteps on the stairs leading up to her apartment. Collie grabbed my hand and pulled me toward the fire escape window. We have to go. Now. Collie, wait. The front door exploded inward just as we reached the window. I caught a glimpse of two men in dark clothes before Collie shoved me onto the fire escape and followed, slamming the window behind us. Move, she hissed, and we scrambled down the metal stairs as fast as we could manage. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. 24 hours ago, my biggest worry was whether my PowerPoint slides were readable from the back row. Now I was running for my life with a woman I'd just met, fleeing from actual criminals who wanted to kill us. We hit the alley running, and Collie grabbed my hand, pulling me through a maze of back streets I never would have been able to navigate alone. The morning was cold and gray, and our breath came out in visible puffs as we ran. Where are we going? I gasped. I don't know, she admitted. Somewhere public. Somewhere safe. But even as she said it, I could hear footsteps behind us, getting closer. We turned a corner and found ourselves in a dead-end alley, trapped between a brick wall and the men who wanted us dead. Well, shit, Collie muttered. The two men appeared at the mouth of the alley, blocking our only exit. One was tall and thin, with a scar running down his left cheek. The other was shorter but broader, with the kind of build that suggested he spent his free time lifting heavy things and breaking people's bones. Collie Morrison, the tall one said, his voice surprisingly cultured. You've caused us quite a bit of trouble. Sorry about that, Collie replied, and I could hear the fear in her voice even though she was trying to sound casual. But in my defense, you guys really should find a more private place for your business meetings. Indeed, and now we need to clean up the mess. His eyes shifted to me, both messes. That's when something inside me snapped. Maybe it was the adrenaline, or maybe it was the way he looked at me like I was disposable. But suddenly I wasn't scared anymore. I was angry. Hey, asshole, I said, stepping forward before Collie could stop me. I'm a literature professor. Do you know what that means? The man looked confused. What? It means I've spent my entire adult life studying stories about people who overcome impossible odds through cleverness and determination. It means I know exactly how this story ends. Collie grabbed my arm. Maria, what are you doing? It means, I continued, reaching into my bag, that I always carry appropriate reading material. I pulled out my hardcover copy of the Odyssey, beautiful, heavy, first edition volume that had cost me 3 months of grocery money, and hurled it at the tall man's head with all the strength I could muster. Eat Hick salmon or asshole. The book caught him square in the face, and he stumbled backward with a cry of pain and surprise. His partner went for his gun, but Collie had already moved, grabbing a trash can lid and flinging it like a frisbee. It hit the shorter man in the stomach, doubling him over. "Run!" Collie shouted, and we bolted past them toward the street. Behind us, I could hear angry voices and what sounded like someone tripping over garbage cans. We burst out of the alley and onto the main street where early morning commuters were beginning to fill the sidewalks. "This way," Collie said, pulling me toward a nearby coffee shop, not hers, thankfully. We ducked inside and found a table in the back corner, both of us breathing hard and trying to look like normal customers rather than fugitives from justice. "Did you just quote classical literature at armed criminals?" Collie asked, staring at me with a mixture of admiration and disbelief. "Homer, specifically." And yes, I think I did. That was either the bravest or stupidest thing I've ever seen. Probably both. I looked around the coffee shop, suddenly aware that we weren't safe yet. What do we do now? Collie was quiet for a moment, thinking, now we go to the police. "You're right, running won't solve this. But we need insurance first." "What kind of insurance?" She pulled out her phone and showed me the video again. "I'm going to upload this to every social media platform I can think of and send copies to every news outlet in the city. Once it's public, there's no point in killing us to keep us quiet." It was a good plan, but I could see the flaw immediately. What if they find us before you can upload it? Then we improvise. She smiled, and despite everything we'd been through in the last hour, I felt that same flutter of attraction I'd experienced the night before. "You're pretty good at improvising." I threw a book at a murderer. That's not improvising, that's panic. That book probably saved our lives. I thought about my poor, battered copy of the Odyssey, probably lying in a puddle somewhere in that alley. Homer would be proud. Or horrified that you used his epic poem as a weapon. Are you? Kidding. Homer loved violence. Have you read the Iliad? And somehow, impossibly, we were flirting again. In the middle of running for our lives, with killers potentially tracking us down. I was sitting in a random coffee shop debating classical literature with the most interesting woman I'd ever met. "Maria?" Collie said, her voice suddenly serious. "Yeah, when this is over, and it will be over, would you like to go on a proper date? One that doesn't involve armed criminals or fleeing for our lives?" I reached across the table and took her hand. "I would love that." "Good." She squeezed my fingers. "Because I have a feeling this is going to be a really good story to tell our grandchildren." The police were surprisingly unhelpful. Detective Rodriguez, a tired-looking man with coffee stains on his shirt and the demeanor of someone who'd seen too much, listened to our story with the kind of polite skepticism usually reserved for alien abduction reports. "So let me get this straight," he said, leaning back in his chair in the tiny interview room at the precinct. "You accidentally filmed a murder, the killers chased you through downtown Chicago, and you fought them off with classic literature." "That's an oversimplification, but essentially accurate," I said. "And where is this video now?" Collie held up her phone. "Right here. I've got copies backed up to the cloud, and I'm ready to upload it everywhere the moment you give me the green light." "Ma'am, I understand you're scared, but we can't launch a full investigation based on a video. That might show anything from a drug deal gone wrong to a couple of kids with cap guns." "It wasn't cap guns," Collie said through gritted teeth. "There's a dead body in the alley behind my coffee shop, which we've already checked. No body, no blood, no evidence of any crime." My heart sank. They cleaned it up. Or there was nothing to clean up. Detective Rodriguez stood, clearly ready to end this conversation. "Look, I'll have a patrol car swing by your neighborhood a few extra times tonight, but unless you have something more concrete than a blurry cell phone video." "More concrete?" Collie exploded, jumping to her feet. How about the fact that they broke into my apartment and chased us through the streets? Do you have any witnesses to that? Any security camera footage? Any evidence besides your word? We didn't, and we all knew it. An hour later, we were standing on the sidewalk outside the police station, no closer to safety than we'd been before. So that's it? I asked. They're just going to pretend nothing happened. Welcome to the justice sim, Collie said bitterly. Unless you're bleeding on their shoes, they don't want to hear about it. So what now? She was quiet for a long moment, staring up at the Chicago skyline. Now we take care of this ourselves. Collie, no. We are not vigilantes. We are a coffee shop owner and a literature professor. We don't know I know exactly how to handle this. She started walking toward the street, pulling out her phone. I'm going to post that video everywhere. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Reddit, everywhere I can think of. And I'm going to make sure everyone in Chicago sees exactly what these guys look like. And then what? They'll just disappear? Then they'll have bigger problems than 2 witnesses. They'll have the entire internet looking for them. It wasn't a perfect plan, but it was the only plan we had. We spent the rest of the afternoon in various coffee shops and internet cafes, uploading the video to every platform we could think of, and writing detailed accounts of what had happened. That evening, the story was starting to gain traction. Local news blogs picked it up, then Twitter users began sharing it, and before we knew it, hashtag Chicago murder video was trending. It's working, Collie said, refreshing her phone for the 100th time. Look at this, someone recognized the tall guy. His name is Vincent Torino, and he's got a rap sheet longer than War and Peace. What about the other one, Marcus Kellerman? Armed. Robbery, assault, extortion. Charming fellows. I felt a mixture of relief and terror. So now the police have to take us seriously, right? You'd think so, but Callie's expression was troubled. The problem is, now they know we've gone public. They can't just kill us quietly anymore. That doesn't mean they won't try. As if summoned by her words, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Nice video. See you soon. We need to get out of here, I said, looking around the coffee shop nervously. Where? They found my apartment. They probably know where you live. Not where I live. Where I work. I stood up, gathering my things. Northwestern has security, cameras, people around all the time. And I have keys to the literature building. You want to hide out at your university? It's better than staying in public where they can find us easily. 20 minutes later, we were walking across the Northwestern campus in the gathering dusk. The Gothic Revival buildings looked like something out of a fairy tale, all pointed spires and carved stone details. Under normal circumstances, I loved this place. Tonight, it felt like a fortress. This is your office? Collie asked as I unlocked the door to a small room on the 3rd floor of the literature building. Home sweet home. The office was cramped but cozy, filled with bookshelves and papers and the accumulated detritus of a decade of academic life. There's a couch that's almost comfortable, and the vending machines down the hall have surprisingly decent coffee. It's perfect. She settled onto the couch and pulled out her phone again. The video's up to 2 million views. Local news wants to interview us? Good. The more public this gets, the safer we are. But even as I said it, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were still in danger. Vincent Torino and Marcus Kellerman had killed at least one person that we knew of. They weren't going to just give up because their faces were on the internet. I was right to be worried. At midnight, the building's fire alarm went off. That's not a drill, I said, jumping to my feet as the piercing sound echoed through the hallways. Collie was already at the window, looking down at the quad below. There's no fire trucks. And look, she pointed to the main entrance of the building. 2 guys just went inside. My blood turned to ice. They found us. How? Security cameras, maybe. Or they've been watching the building. I grabbed my bag and started toward the door, then stopped. Wait, if they're coming up the stairs, we can't go down. So we go up. The roof access was one floor above us, reached by a narrow staircase that led to a heavy metal door marked with warnings about authorized personnel only. I'd never been up there, but it seemed like our only option. We climbed as quietly as we could, though. Fire alarm was loud enough to mask our footsteps. Behind us, I could hear voices in the stairwell, definitely male, definitely angry. The roof door was locked, but Collie produced a hairpin from somewhere in her jacket and had it open in about 30 seconds. How did you never mind? I don't want to know. The roof of the literature building was flat and covered with air conditioning units and ventilation equipment. Chicago stretched out around us in all directions, the city lights twinkling like stars. Under different circumstances, it would have been romantic. There, Collie said, pointing to the fire escape on the far side of the building. We can get down that way. But before we could take more than a few steps, the roof access door burst open behind us. Going somewhere? Vincent Torino emerged onto the roof, followed by his partner. In the light from the city, I could see that my copy of the Odyssey had left a very satisfying bruise on his forehead. You two have caused us a lot of trouble, he continued, walking slowly toward us. But don't worry. This ends tonight. Actually, I said, backing toward the edge of the roof with Collie beside me. I think you're wrong about that. Oh, really? And why's that? Because you made a fundamental error in your approach to the situation. I was stalling for time, hoping desperately that someone would respond to the fire alarm or that campus security would show up or that literally anyone would help us. What error? You underestimated your opponents. See, most people would be terrified right now. Most people would beg for their lives or try to bargain with you. And you're not most people. We're not most people. Collie stepped up beside me, and I could see her scanning the roof for anything that might help us. I'm a small business owner who's been dealing with difficult customers for 15 years. And she's a literature professor. So, I said, reaching into my bag again, we know how these stories end. This time, instead of a book, I pulled out the fire extinguisher I'd grabbed from the hallway on our way to the roof. It was heavier than I'd expected, but adrenaline made up for that. Seriously? Vincent laughed. You're going to fight us with a fire extinguisher? Actually, Collie said, and I realized she'd grabbed something to a metal wrench from one of the air conditioning units. We're going to fight you with whatever we can find. Because that's what people do when their backs are against the wall. This is ridiculous. Marcus, just shoot them. But Marcus hesitated, looking around nervously. Vinny, there's cops all over the place down there. The fire alarm, I don't care about the fire alarm. You should, I said, because I pulled it. Vincent's face went white. You what? The fire alarm. I pulled it before we came up here. I figured if we were going to have a showdown, we might as well have an audience. Below us, I could hear sirens approaching fire trucks, police cars, ambulances. The cavalry was coming, but I wasn't sure they'd get here in time. Vincent raised his gun, his face twisted with rage. You stupid bitches, you've ruined everything. That's when Collie moved. She lunged forward with the wrench, swinging it at Vincent's gun hand. He fired, but the shot went wide, and the gun went skittering across the roof. I didn't hesitate. I squeezed the trigger on the fire extinguisher, sending a cloud of chemical foam directly into Marcus's face. He stumbled backward, clawing at his eyes, and tripped over one of the ventilation units. The gun! Collie shouted, diving toward where Vincent's weapon had landed. But Vincent was faster. He tackled her before she could reach it, and they rolled across the roof, fighting for control. I dropped the fire extinguisher and looked around desperately for another weapon. That's when I saw a piece of the fire escape ladder that had broken off and was lying near the edge of the roof. It was about 3 feet long and made of solid metal. Perfect. I grabbed it and turned back toward the fight just in time to see Vincent pin Collie to the ground, his hands around her throat. Get off her. I screamed, swinging the ladder piece. Like a baseball bat, it connected with the side of Vincent's head with a sound like a watermelon hitting pavement. He rolled off Collie and lay still. Holy shit, Collie gasped, sitting up and rubbing her throat. Where did you learn to do that? Graduate school fencing class, I said, surprised by how calm I sounded. Also, pure rage. Marcus was still stumbling around blind from the fire extinguisher foam, so Collie grabbed the gun and pointed it at him. Sit down and put your hands on your head. I can't see. That's the point. Sit down anyway. By the time the police reached the roof, we had both men subdued and were sitting on an air conditioning unit, sharing a bottle of water I'd found in my bag. I still had the fire escape ladder in my hands, just in case. Are you two all right? Detective Rodriguez asked as his officers handcuffed Vincent and Marcus. We're fine, Collie said. Though I think Maria here might have missed her calling as a vigilante. I prefer literary action hero, I corrected. Rodriguez looked at the scene, one unconscious murder suspect, one blinded by fire extinguisher foam, two disheveled women, sitting calmly amid the chaos, and shook his head. I'm never going to understand this case, he muttered. That's okay, I said, finally setting down my makeshift weapon. I don't think I understand it either.